The international break has been a nightmare for FPL managers with injuries to big players like Chris Wood, Cole Palmer and Vardial. And in this video, I'm going to talk about exactly what we should be doing with those players alongside my own Game Week 30 transfer plans, as we have a lot to prepare for in this upcoming Game Week 30 deadline. So as always, if you look forward to it, make sure to drop a like on the video and of course, hit that subscribe button for daily fantasy content. FPL is finally back. So enough waffling, let's get into today's video. So it has been a lovely break from FPL, but we now have to start getting our heads screwed on in preparation for Game Week 30. Now, reminder, this weekend is FA Cup football, so I really do advise still not making early transfers. I am seeing hundreds of thousands of transfers in and out for players. We still got the FA Cup this weekend, which is also going to possibly decide what happens in future game weeks. So it is really important to hold off until that Tuesday deadline for Game Week 30. But of course, we do need to address some of the elephants in the room, and that is going to be Cole Palmer and Chris Wood that I previously discussed. Now, we've got my Game Week 30 team here. We'll talk about that in a minute. We got to talk about Palmer and Wood because I'm pretty certain that at least one of these players is owned in your team if you're watching this right now. So first up, Cole Palmer. We got this update here from Kieran Gile. I believe they are a pretty decent, credible journalist here that has stated that Cole Palmer hasn't actually started training with the team yet since picking up the injury, which again was before the international break. He missed that game against Arsenal, which is not ideal. And they are now worried about the availability against Spurs. Now, the frustrating thing is that Game Week 30 for Palmer, I actually think it's a good game week. And it's also worth noting that Palmer's returns have kind of dipped since the absence of Nicholas Jackson, and he is now back in full training. So I really think that the return of Jackson is going to improve Cole Palmer. Palmer needs runners beyond him. When he's got people like Sancho and Nkunku always looking to feet, doesn't get the best out of him. Jackson definitely unlocks the potential of Palmer, but I do think if he is going to be ruled out for Game Week 30, there is a debate to be had to sell him. Of course, depending on your chip strategy as well, which we will touch on. So right now, Cole Palmer is a big doubt, but we will get a press conference before the game. My personal opinion is that if you are looking to wildcard in Game Week 31 and Palmer is then ruled out for Game Week 30, I think we can sell him, and I will touch on some brilliant differentials that we can go to. The other big problem, of course, is going to be Chris Wood. Now, with Chris Wood's case, he actually got injured in international duty, which is not ideal, and he's officially been ruled out for the FA Cup game this weekend. So we know that for certain. And if he is completely ruled out for that FA Cup game, I think that is a bit of a red flag in preparation for Game Week 30. It's not ideal at all. And of course, the home game being against Man United, it's not incredible, but it's still a decent enough fixture. And with the long-term fixtures of Forest looking a little bit iffy, I think there are better forwards out there. If we get the confirmation that Chris Wood is ruled out for Game Week 30 as well, I definitely, for one, will be looking to sell him because I think there are some brilliant alternatives out there, in particular for Game Week 30. But I think the general advice is this: wait and see on both. I wouldn't be selling them because if they both get past fit, looking at my team right now, I would happily keep them for their respective fixtures because I think they can do well in them. So I wouldn't be getting trigger happy and selling them as of now. Now, in terms of my own team, 2.2 million in the bank, one free transfer available. We'll touch on my chip strategy after this because it will give a bit of context in terms of how I plan on setting up my team. But if you were to say to me right now, this is my team for Game Week 30, I would be more than happy with it. But with a wildcard lined up for Game Week 31, yes, you can roll transfers beyond a wildcard. I understand that. But I do like the opportunity of maybe taking a 1 week punt on certain options. So if we get no injury news, then Wood could possibly go out to a differential. We'll touch on that in a minute. Otherwise, I think the rest of the team looks pretty good and I'll be happy about having this team. Just not having any Man City exposure for that Leicester at home game does feel a little bit scary. But again, there are a few differentials out there that we can go to that are looking great. So let's touch on some replacements for both of these players and, of course, my current chip strategy. So if we get the news that Chris Wood is ruled out for Game Week 30, then I personally think I will be looking to sell him because I just don't look at him and think to myself, I want this guy long term. And as I mentioned, spoiler alert, the plan is to wildcard in Game Week 31. And I do think there are some brilliant alternatives available to us in game week 30. So I've highlighted 3 here. We got João Pedro at 5.6 million, we got Marmoush at 7.3 million, and we got Mateta at 7.5 million. Now, of course, when we are looking at the fixtures right now, for my personal case, I am just looking at game week 30 in isolation completely, because that is going to be my 1 week punt. Beyond that, it is what it is afterwards. But it is worth noting, of course, that we do have some good fixtures for these players long term if you wanted to keep on them. So, for example, if you're looking to not wildcard in game week 31, Mateta doubles in game week 32, which is fantastic. João Pedro has Leicester at home in game week 32, which is great. And Man City, of course, have arguably the fixture of the game week in this specific game week for Marmoush. The reason why I've highlighted game week 33 to 36 is because this is taken from FPL team in collaboration with Planet FPL, and these are projected fixtures. So game week 33 to 36 is currently single game weeks, but we are expecting those teams that progress in the FA Cup to double in game week 33 and then blank in game week 34. And again, that is why it's so important to hold off on those transfers until we get that information after this weekend. You don't have long to wait, so you can chill out till then. But as you can see here, Brighton possibly will double in 33, which looks great alongside those earlier fixtures. Palace, I think you can have until game week 33 and then maybe look to sell. And City, you could get a situation where they double in 33 and possibly in 36, making someone like a Marmoush or a Haaland fantastic long term. Now, bringing it back to my team right now, if I'm looking at game week 30 in isolation, I think Mateta is just a no-brainer here. An amazing fixture away against Southampton. Now, again, it's worth noting, all 3 of these players play on the weekend. I'm expecting Mateta to start. I'm expecting João Pedro to start. I have no idea whether Marmoush starts. The big difference here is that if Marmoush plays on the weekend in the FA Cup, I have no idea whether he plays in game week 30 because Man City have so many players that they can rotate in and out of the team. So you are playing a bit of a guessing game. The only way I think I would go for Marmoush is if that he was completely rested in the FA Cup game, meaning his minutes in the Premier League probably look heightened, and that would be great to have some exposure in that Man City game when I don't have Erling Haaland. João Pedro, I like the idea of, but for me, on my chip strategy right now of a wildcard in game week 31, I prefer Mateta or Marmoush over a João Pedro. So, really, the obvious pick is Mateta. I think the only way I wouldn't go there is that he plays 90 minutes or more in the FA Cup in the weekend, and it doesn't look like he is fully fit off the back of the, obviously, head injury that he did sustain in the previous weeks. But right now, if I had to push for an answer, I think Mateta is just a fantastic pick for game week 30, and it's worth noting, long-term, brilliant in preparation for double game week 32 as well. Marmoush is a very, very niche pick, and I would only go there if he had minimal minutes on the weekend, which basically sets him up for decent minutes in game week 30. So if we do get the news that Cole Palmer is once again ruled out for game week 30, then I definitely think there's an argument to get rid of him, especially if you are in a position where you're looking to wildcard in game week 31, like my strategy. It's worth noting, longer term though, I think there is an argument to keep Cole Palmer because away against Brentford in 31, some people will say that's good. I think that's still a difficult fixture, but he could do well. Again, I just think the return of Nicholas Jackson enhances him as a pick. Then you've got what I would say the great fixture, game week 32 at home against Ipswich. Then they got Fulham and Everton and Liverpool. So I would make an argument that after game week 32, we could go without Cole Palmer in general. You're really kind of keeping him for that Ipswich game in game week 32. So if he's ruled out, I do think I will be looking to sell him. I just don't really see the upside of keeping him, and I can always bring him back in a wild card. And I do get a little bit worried that if Mares is going to rush Nicholas Jackson back in, are they also going to rush Cole Palmer back in? I don't know if they will. So we've got a couple of replacements here, and obviously the third one is a little bit mysterious, but I'll explain why. So once again, if we're looking at game week 30 in isolation, it's a little bit boring, but it is the same thing once again. I think it is Crystal Palace away against Southampton, or it's Man City at home against Leicester. I know people are saying they want to go Bruno Fernandes, but as a 1 week punt, Bruno Fernandes away against Forest, or these fixtures, I want a piece of these every day of the week. I know Bruno Fernandes is the talisman in that team. I know he can do well in that game, but I also think Forest are just a lot better than the teams that we're discussing. So from Crystal Palace, I think there are only two options. We got Sarr and we got Eze. Now, Sarr, in terms of the underlying numbers, is slightly leading the way. Better expected goals per 90. We got big chances per 90, significantly in Sarr's favour. And shots per 90, interestingly, is actually in Eze's favour. So even though Eze has been a little bit erratic in his actual point scoring, I would say the same for Sarr as well. And Eze's numbers have always been decent. It's just getting those numbers to the level of Sarr in terms of the big chances, which he is significantly missing. I think whenever we always pick Eze, it's because of a nostalgia pick and because we know that he is always the best player in the Palace team, but just right now hasn't equated to actual points. You can see that at the end there, only 4.01 points per 90 compared to Sarr's 5.27. So once again, if I was just to like scrub out the prices of both of these, there wouldn't be a decision to have here. It would be Sarr to pick. And I still think that is the case if I was going to be selling Cole Palmer. It's that sort of thing in our minds though, where getting rid of someone like Cole Palmer, nearly 11 million, to somebody like 5.6 million, doesn't feel fantastic. But I think we got to play the fixtures here as a short-term pick. And I would also argue that Palace long-term are also great, as we've already discussed. Now, this is the mysterious one here because I've just put Man City mid and that is it. Because I've spoken about this. Leicester at home is the fixture that we're targeting for a Man City midfielder. The reason why I have no idea who that could be is because we won't know until after the FA Cup game. So let me play out an example here. If against Bournemouth in the FA Cup, someone like a Savinho plays literally no minutes and we know that he is an important team player for Pep, then I'll make the assumption that he is going to then be available and start that game against Leicester, because we need to remember 4 days later after that, they have got the Manchester derby. So I see no reason why anybody that doesn't feature in that Bournemouth game won't play in the Leicester game. So let's take Jeremy Doku as an example. I hate Doku as a pick long term, but for one game week in isolation, if he doesn't play anything against Bournemouth and we assume he isn't in the starting 11 for the Manchester derby, then what a phenomenal pick that would be for the Leicester game as a 1 week isolation pick. You just don't want to get caught up with him being in your team long term. So to conclude, I don't really like the idea of selling Cole Palmer. I really do hope that he is available. It just kind of fixes all the issues. However, if he is ruled out, then I think a Crystal Palace midfielder is the right answer. However, if the team is going to be a double combination of selling both Wood and Palmer, I think I'd rather go for the safer option up front of Mateta and then chasing the differential upside of a Man City midfielder. That is where I currently lie. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. So as I mentioned, I thought I'd just give you a quick update regarding my chip strategy, because I am one of those managers that has used their assistant manager chip for game weeks 26, I think it was, but I still have all of the others available. And I have kind of been fleeting around with different strategies, and I'm not completely locked in on this one right now, but I feel a bit more clearer on this strategy. So as of right now, I am looking, as I've mentioned, to wildcard in game week 31. I just think my team is really kind of scrambling to the end right now. I don't love it. So it kind of ties in nicely with my own team and also the way that the upcoming doubles are going to be arriving. So game week 31 wildcard allows me to hopefully get the information of a potential double in game week 33. It's a reason why I don't really like the wildcard 30, because even though the FA Cup results are going to happen and we can make our own assumptions if they are going to be in double game week 33, until we get that official announcement, I don't feel like I can fully commit my team to a wildcard. So wildcard 31 just gives you a few more days to hopefully get an announcement before we actually activate it. So it allows us to build a team to target double game week 32, so Palace and of course Newcastle players, and also the potential blank in game week 34. Now we'll touch on that in a minute. It also means, as I discussed, we might get some more information for game week 30. Now, double game week 32 has officially been announced, as we've spoken about. Now this is where the controversial thing is, because I spoke about previously triple captaining on Alexander Isak in game week 32, and I still think that is a viable strategy. However, there has been a common discussion in the FPL community about actually bench boosting in game week 32, and I actually don't mind it at all. So it's not ideal because, of course, there are only two teams that have a double, and that's going to be Palace and Newcastle. So usually when you bench boost, you want 15 players all doubling, happy days. But sometimes you are then making sacrifices and bringing in players that you don't actually love for some half decent doubles, and that is going to be the case for game week 33 double if it does happen. The doubles aren't amazing, and I would argue that the actual single game week fixtures in 32 are better than that of the doubles. What I also do like is that when we're building a bench boost team, you got to make sure that the players that you bring in that are cheap also have good fixtures. Brighton are up against Leicester, so you can bring in a cheap Brighton defender, you could bring in someone like a Minter, and you could also have João Pedro as part of that bench boost for the Leicester game. And Villa away against Southampton, Morgan Rogers, fantastic. You could pick up an Aston Villa defender, and I would argue that there's real upside for that strategy. Now, then what that allows you to do is in double game week 33, which will be announced hopefully, we can use the free hit and really go in on just the best 11 players, rather than maybe making sacrifices in your squad to try and get a bench that allows you to bench boost. And that is my current preference, just having the best possible starting 11 in a free hit and a double, rather than being a bit safer with your free hit in a blank in game week 34. And that's what I'm doing here. With the wildcard in 31, it should allow me to build a good enough team alongside free transfers to then get through the blank in game week 34. Of course, those would be the teams that double in 33. And then finally, the only problem here is then, of course, when do I use my triple captain? Because originally, Alexander Isak in double game week 32 was just an absolute no-brainer. Now, again, there are some potential projections that Erling Haaland could have a double in 36. If that is the case, that will be incredible, because one of those doubles is going to be up against Southampton away. That is just an absolute no-brainer. But I would argue as well that in game week 36, even if it doesn't get announced as a double, triple captain on Erling Haaland away against Southampton still isn't the worst situation in the world. We also have a fixture of Alexander Isak at home against Ipswich. Not ideal. I could just play it in game week 32, but I do like the idea of maybe holding off for that potential double in 36. So that's the current chip strategy. It can change, but this is where we're landing right now. Okay, so let's take a look at my game week 30 transfer plans. And again, we've touched on the different outcomes, what could happen if Palmer's injured, what happens if Chris Wood's injured. So hopefully here, this just gives a bit of clarification on what I would do in each scenario. So option number one, Palmer and Chris Wood past fit, and the team looks like this. Now, with 2.2 million in the bank, I would make the argument that this team is perfectly fine, but there are options available. So I could upgrade Pickford to a goalkeeper. I'd be looking at chasing just someone like an Edison or Ortega, whoever is the Man City goalkeeper, and just hoping Man City actually keep a clean sheet. So that could be a potential move, but it feels quite boring, but it makes sense with the clean sheet odds of Pickford being really low away against Liverpool, of course. Otherwise, what I could do is upgrade Vissa to Mateta and bench Mbeumo. That is also an option for my team, and that feels like the most likely if we were to have clarification that Palmer and Wood are both available. Now, if, for example, we get the news that Chris Wood is still out, then as I discussed, I think it's a really simple move for my team, and that is going to be selling Chris Wood and bringing in Mateta. If Palmer's fit, the team would look like this, and I think it looks great. I've got Mateta for that away game against Southampton, as long as there are no injuries in that weekend game for them in the FA Cup. And this team looks really good, and I'm chasing the upside of Mateta. The only downside, no Man City exposure, but as I mentioned, that Leicester game could be seen as a bit of a second string team possibly, with the Manchester derby only a few days after that Leicester game and Bournemouth only a few days before. So I think that could be a little bit of a banana skin game for Man City, possibly from a motivation perspective. So I think that could be my team here if Chris Wood's ruled out. If we get the news that Chris Wood's ruled out and Cole Palmer's ruled out, then it's worth noting I could easily just bring in Vissa for Palmer and be done with it. And I think that is the logical move. Don't take the -4. However, as I discussed, if we get the news that, a Doku is going to start for City or somebody like a Savinho, then I could easily just make a very, very rogue move and do something like this. Yes, it would be for a -4, but do I think Vissa is going to do much away against Newcastle? Probably not. And the team could look something like this as part of a -4. It is not the most logical move, and I do have Mbeumo already away against Newcastle, hence why I don't love the idea of also bringing in Vissa. And for a -4, I don't think it's terrible. Yes, I would be playing with fire a little bit with the Man City rotation, but I do feel quite confident that any player that doesn't play against Bournemouth will play against Leicester because they're not deemed a first-team player. and then therefore they'll have to play the Leicester game because they won't feature in the Manchester derby. So yes, it's a bit rogue, but I do quite like this upside chasing. Maybe I'm a little bit on the ropes right now because we had a few red arrows and I want to chase some real upside picks. But I think there's also logic in game week 30 by going down this avenue. So there are many different routes that we can go for, and it comes down to the same thing. Be patient. Don't make a transfer right now. Let the FA Cup games happen, and then we can decide on Monday. But hopefully this has given me a bit of clarity and maybe you guys on what direction we can take our teams. Yes, guys, okay, that is going to wrap up today's Game Week 30 updated transfer plans video. We are gaining more information, but still the message is try and hold off on those transfers for a bit longer. But it is definitely worth just trying to get a little bit of an understanding of what you are going to do with your team in certain scenarios. FPL's finally back. It feels good to say that. So if you did enjoy the video, please do consider dropping a like and of course hitting that subscribe button. Any questions, drop them in the comment section. I'll be trying to do daily videos now in preparation for Game Week 30. So I'll see you in tomorrow's video. Take care. Cheers.